Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing here a test hand demonstration for Magical Musketeers. This is definitely going to be really fun because it is pretty much the debut of Magical Musketeers on the channel, of course, and to perform test hands, I guess for the first time on the channel, is definitely going to be something that is going to be new and very interesting. And as a result, we have no idea what's gonna really happen in this because of the fact that, unlike actual games that I've actually tested on in Dueling Nexus or anything like that, I couldn't actually describe how things would actually turn about in this particular format, given that in a test hand demonstration like this, because we're not necessarily interacting with different monsters that your opponent actually has, it's hard to actually play about each of these things because it's one of the most interactive decks in the game. It depends upon what your opponent is actually doing, and this deck responds in that particular manner. However, in this case we're going up against pretty much nothing, so it is going to be very hard to actually assume different things, but I guess I'll do my best to try and explain it. But before I begin, I would like to remind you guys to drop a like, share, comment and subscribe if you guys enjoyed this video, and also hit the bell notification as well. It really does help. However, with that being said, let's begin. Alright, so as you can see here with our opening hand, it is definitely very hard to actually, I guess, describe what we could potentially do. Now, in this particular opening hand, we do have over here our Casper, which is definitely very nice because this will essentially allow us to add any Magical Musketeer card from our deck to our hand. So what I could easily just do here is normal summon out the Casper and pretty much leave it there. I mean, that's how simple this particular deck is. So what I mean by this is, now that this is actually happening, during your opponent's turn, you could actually perform a lot of different things. Of course, you could also set the Crooked Crown because it is one of the cards that's actually going to be applicable in this particular circumstance. So, for example, you set this down, and during your opponent's main phase, you can immediately activate this card and special summon a Magical Musket monster from your hand. So in this case, you could either bring out Calamity or Kid Brave. In this case, you bring out Kid Brave because Calamity doesn't really have any purpose in any kind of way. And if you do, your opponent's main monster zone in that monster's current column is unused, and that zone cannot be used until the end of this turn, which is definitely very powerful, of course. Now, because you're going first, you also couldn't really go into your max because max depends on your opponent actually having something. So ironically, this deck can actually function as a second turn deck as well. Definitely fantastic, despite the fact that you're responding to different cards. However, with that being said, going first definitely has its benefits as well. So you would be able to go for Kid Brave and leave it as is, of course, and pretty much put it in a different column where it doesn't affect any of these two, because from there you could pretty much have any of these to respond as well. If your opponent has something to negate, perhaps a, I don't know, impermanence or something like that, you always have the Last Stand available, you always have Calamity available, but whichever purpose you actually want, you could go for. And if your opponent wants to activate in any of these, that's obviously going to be an issue. But in this case, Crooked Crown does actually prevent them from doing quite a few things there, so it is quite nice, and everything that you do is going to depend on how you are going to interact with the opponent. So I really can't explain what's going to happen because it's really hard to draw upon hypotheticals in such a diverse format where there's so many decks out there. So we're just going to move on to a different test hand. Alright, so here's another different test hand. Of course, we have all of this here, which is definitely quite interesting, of course. Firstly, you can normal summon out your Kid Brave, and in this case, you do have the option to technically activate one of your cards. You could go for Cross Domination, or you could go for Steady Hands. And what's so great about these two particular cards is that, well, technically you could force yourself to activate the Kid Brave's effect, allowing you to technically bonus off that. So for example, you could activate Steady Hands, go for the Kid Brave, of course, and from that you could discard one of your cards. I'll discard the charge, and we could draw 2 cards and discard 1. So we'll draw 1, we'll draw 2, and look at that, we got a Monster Reborn. So in that case we could get rid of Doc. So we simply get rid of Doc there, and we leave it as is. And this is already looking really good, because pretty much on your opponent's turn, when they attack your Kid Brave, you could technically do the same move again with the Cross Domination this time. Definitely powerful, protective. You also have Ash here to respond and disrupt. And of course, if your Kid Brave goes to the grave with the Doc as well, you could always go for Monster Reborn. Even if your Kid Brave somehow gets destroyed, what you could do is on your following turn, you could activate Monster Reborn, bring back Doc, and then activate this to, I guess, trigger off your Doc, bringing back your Kid Brave to the hand and normal summoning it out, and giving you more purposes to follow up on as well. And of course, you also have the option to go to max on the following turn. But we'll definitely be seeing this when we're doing turn 2 test hands. Alright, so here's a different test hand. Well, obviously we can't really do too much in this particular circumstance, so all we could do is really go for the Casper. However, what I do like about this is that we could technically set some cards down as a bit of bait. So we could set down one of these. We could set down the second one if we want to as well, and that would be fantastic, because by going for these two, you're kind of forcing your opponent to activate something. Otherwise it acts as a bluff to scare the opponent. But even so, you always have cards like Desperado and Last Stand to pretty much respond to whatever your opponent actually has on the field. Casper will also trigger, allowing you to add some cards to follow up on that play. Definitely fantastic. And even if they destroy Casper, you always got Charge in the Dark World, which allows you to do a few things of yourself as well. Definitely fantastic. Alright, so here's a very different test hand. As you can see here, we definitely drew into a lot more monsters than we actually thought, but that's okay. We do have here the Crackdown. Of course, the Crackdown is meant to be an impermanence, so if you guys have impermanence, that's definitely better. But in this circumstance, we do have Kid Brave, Casper, and Starfire. What do you want to go off with? In this case, I'm happy to go with the Kid Brave, because, and then have the impermanence out, otherwise you set the Crackdown. Whichever, or I'm just going to assume that it's a impermanence in this case, because that's how I actually wanted this card to be. But basically what you do is you have Kid Brave here, you activate impermanence to, I guess, trigger off your Kid Brave, and from that you could essentially discard either your Casper or your Starfire and potentially draw 2 cards, and then we'll discard 1 as well. So we'll draw 2 right here. And then I'm thinking, let's just get rid of Casper as well. You know, so both those monsters are in the grave, you draw 2 more cards, and on your following turn you have a Crooked Crown to start you off. You have here your Charge into the Dark World to also bring back one of these monsters. Absolutely fantastic, of course. And of course, you also have here you're Caught by the Grave as well, so that's definitely fantastic. But you know, it does give you quite a few different options depending again on how your opponent responds. Otherwise, you could also link up if your monster survives, of course. So yeah, it's definitely quite nice, quite diverse in what you could potentially get out of this. Alright, so again, another different hand here. I love the fact that we're actually able to do so many test hands, because each of these test hands are so short. This actually gives the opportunity to be able to explain each of the cards and how they interact with one another, which is definitely fantastic, of course. So we can begin here with the Starfire, and we have one of the more active cards like Pot of Desires, which we can activate, in which case we banish off 10 cards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we'll draw 2 more cards. And from that, let's just quickly check what we have here. So we have our Ash, we have here Casper, Kid Brave, Steady Hands, Crooked Crown, another Steady Hands, Wild, another Ash, Desperado, and Instant Fusion, which is no big deal, of course. So we could set that aside and we could see what we actually draw into. So in this case, we drew into our Crackdown, otherwise our Impermanence, as well as another Starfire, which is definitely fantastic, of course. Of course, this can go to the grave, and Starfire can also special summon out to one of your monsters. In this case, what do you have here? I'm thinking, let's go for Kid Brave. I definitely like the idea of going for Kid Brave, because let's say your opponent had some cards down. We have the Impermanence or the Crackdown, whichever you prefer. And we also have here our Fiendish Deal, which is definitely fantastic. But we could definitely respond in different ways. So say now it's your opponent's turn. You could respond with any of these, triggering off your Starfire and your Kid Brave again. Kid Brave gets rid of the spare Starfire. And we could draw 2 more cards and discard 1 card. So we get Caspar, and we have here a Dancing Needle. In this case, we could just get rid of one of our spares, which is fantastic, of course. We could also follow up by normal summoning out here the Doc. In fact, you could just discard the Caspar if you want to get it back. And from that, what we do is we could then activate one of these other cards, triggering off Doc, bringing back our Caspar. And of course, we can link away one of our monsters if we need to go into our max, and of course max will add cards depending on the spells or the traps or the monsters that your opponent actually controls on their board, and that's definitely fantastic. So as you can see here, this deck works slowly. You're not going to be OTKing your opponent that quickly. You're going to be dealing really small bits of damage, but they definitely do add up, and they will definitely disrupt the opponent quite a bit. However, that's pretty much it for today's video, so I do hope you guys have fun with actually playing this deck. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I'll see you all next time.